Hi guys, my name's Luke Vest and welcome to my show. Today we're going to do something a little different than I've done in the past. I usually do a top countdown of some sort, but this time I'm going to do a fairly well-known conspiracy theory and try to present you with some ideas that I'm sure will be fairly controversial across the board. But feel free to comment and share my video if you would like. Today's video is based on the idea portrayed in the movie The Da Vinci Code, whereas they try to show that there is in fact a bloodline from Jesus Christ who had apparently conceived a child with Mary, not specifically as it's written in the Bible itself, but I'm sure it'll be controversial, so feel free to comment and share and do whatever you feel with the video. I'm not saying that I neither agree or disagree with the theory itself, but feel free to give me your ideas and your opinions on this. All of the information that I'm going to present to you basically is going to be presented based on the premise that Jesus and Mary do in fact have a bloodline. That is something I'm going to assume for the video. That may not necessarily be the case, and I'm sure it's going to be in the comments somewhere that they don't, but I'm just assuming that for this particular video. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I'm going to present you the information that I have found in a way that it would make sense if the case was that they did in fact conceive a child, and there is in fact a bloodline that can be traced and linked to Jesus Christ himself. So first up is the birth of Jesus. It's kind of debated whether he was born on the 25th of December on the specific year. It's on across the board, it's basically somewhere between 1 and 3 BC when he was born. And he supposedly died when he was crucified on the cross, and it stated he was around 30 years old, and it's his date of death is argued also somewhere between 29 and 33 AD, and it was in April, sorry, not March, April, the very beginning part of April, unless you go with Sir Isaac Newton's approach, which he said it had to have been on the 23rd of April in 34 AD, which he's kind of outside of the debated area, but he was a pretty smart guy, so you can't really debunk that either. But it's up in the air about his exact age and his birth and death dates. But he was around 30 years old when he was crucified on the cross. So, assuming that there's a bloodline to be traced, I'm sure that the Catholic Church would want to make sure that it remained a secret at whatever cost, because that's the basis of their entire religion, is that Jesus was a pure soul and he did not sin. Now, it's not necessarily a sin to have a child, but it would take away from the purity of Jesus himself. So I'm sure that the Catholic Church would want to do everything in its power to keep it a secret. And so they would have organized some sort of group with the special interest of making certain that nobody could find out about the bloodline of Jesus. Now, around 30 years old is plenty of years to be alive to have conceived a child. Most people, by the time they're in their 30s, if they're going to have children, have had children or are having children most of the time. And so it's not too far-fetched of an idea that by that time he would have had a child, if in fact he were going to have a child. Who he had it with, all of that other details, I'm not really going to get into because I can't find a whole lot of information that's actual hard fact information. But for sake of argument, we're just going to say that he had a child and there is a bloodline to be traced. Now, if you do indeed believe that they would do anything in their power to keep it a secret, and they did organize this group to make sure that it stayed a secret, it's not too far-fetched that the Catholic Church would organize a group like the Knights Templar to try to keep the secret of the bloodline from reaching anybody. So they had problems after the First Crusades. The Catholic Church would have organized this group long before then to keep this secret, but around, I want to say it's like 1100 AD, they sent these people, this group, to Jerusalem under the premise that they would be guarding people who were making pilgrimage because of the attacks that they were under from bandits and marauders, and they're slaughtering these people making pilgrimage by the hundreds. So they go to the kings, these two kings in Jerusalem, under false pretenses to knight them and give them the authority to go out and hunt down these bandits and protect these people making pilgrimage and solidify their group being legitimate. And so the kings say, yeah, they talked with their council and stuff. They're like, yeah, that is a great idea. You guys need to protect these people who are trying to make pilgrimage for their religious reasons. So at that point, the Knights Templar start going into Jerusalem. As they're allowed to enter Jerusalem and they're helping in this fight for these people to go to the Holy Land, then the Pope grants them immunity from having to follow local laws, which basically makes it so that they can cross any borders without question. They don't pay taxes. They basically only answer to the Pope. Nobody else has authority over them. So they become basically the strongest army in the entire history of the world at the hand of the Pope, who represents the entire Catholic Church, who are trying to keep this bloodline a secret. So he then allows them to go find the Holy Grail, as they call it, which is the bloodline, and they're hunting down this bloodline, trying to keep it a secret and destroy the bloodline so that nobody can ever trace it back to Jesus, and he stays a pure soul as far as the entire church is concerned. In 1312, the Pope he disbanded the group and basically said, because of the scandals that were happening because of King Philip, he owed the Knights Templar so much money that he was putting pressure on the Pope about this public scandal to disband the entire thing and arrest them and try them for all kinds of just crazy stuff. So the Pope disbanded the entire group in 1312. But the question there sits is whether or not he actually disbanded them, or if he formally disbanded them, but in secret reorganized and simplified the group down and made it much smaller and kept it a secret. Because then you start rolling into the next set of crusades, where you have like Joan of Arc of France and that sort of thing during them crusades over the Holy Land, where they're fighting to try and get Jerusalem back. 100 years after the disbanding of the Knights Templar, you have the birth of a very well-known woman from the Crusades. Her name was Joan of Arc. Now, this is where I start to get into some questionable ideas, but assuming that the Catholic Church only formally disbanded the Knights Templar and they were still around in secret, excuse me, 100 years after their formal disbandment and they are forced into secrecy, this woman is born. And she grows up and she basically goes in and convinces the king to let her take a big group of French forces and go fight. And she has absolutely no history with any kind of fighting abilities or any kind of thing that would be associated with the military or her serving or knowing what she's doing. But the king grants her an army to go fight for the Holy Land and try to take the Holy Land back for France. So it leads me to believe that there is a possibility that there may have been some pressure being put on the king from the Catholic Church to give this woman an army. And if this woman was part of the Knights Templar, she would then take the Knights Templar to a whole new level where the Knights Templar are controlling a portion of the French army to go fight in the Holy Lands, to take the Holy Lands back, because they want something that is there. They want it, and they want it bad. So they put this pressure on the king grants it, and she takes this army, and she's known as the Maid of Orleans, which is the famous battle that she goes into in Orleans, where she leads this army into battle, and they just murder it. They kick ass in this battle, and she's a hero in France, and she takes this stuff over, and then she gets captured. And shortly after she's captured, there's a trial, and I believe it's the British. I'll have to check on that, but I'm pretty sure it was the British. Well, English as they were known then. I don't think it was specifically the English that captured her. Somebody that was allied with the English captured her, and she was tried and found guilty of witchcraft and was burned at the stake when she was 19 years old or something like that, because of her just crazy ability in battle. And they go in and slaughter these people. They figured her for a witch. She had no experience, nothing to do with the military, and all of a sudden this 19-year-old girl is leading an army, and they just are ridiculously great. So they figure it's all based on witchcraft. She must be a witch. They try her for it. She's found guilty, and they burn her at the stake. But she is still renowned as a hero in France, which would lead you to believe that the Knights Templar got what they wanted when she was in this battle, and she was a hero from this battle. The Knights Templar got what they wanted, and they got it out of the Holy Land during these crusades, and they moved it so that nobody could find it again. And it leads me to believe that because until the early 1900s, the Holy Land was still under the control of the opposing party until it was taken back over during World War I. So they kind of went from this huge ordeal to they no longer really cared so much. This kind of ended the Crusades and all that stuff, was when they got this Holy Grail. which is like the bloodlines, the proof of bloodlines, and they got it out of the Holy Lands. Now this leads me into my next point. There's this controversial group that there's this big conspiracy theory about. It's a proven fact that it was a real group, but according to historical accounts, they were disbanded and there were several people that were tried and that sort of thing from a group called the Illuminati. And what they were trying to do was illuminate people, or basically show them the truth. And I believe that they were trying to obtain the Holy Grail, which was proof of the bloodlines of Jesus Christ from the Catholic Church. Now, if you run with me on this idea, the Catholic Church would then be hunting down this Illuminati group because they don't want anybody giving them an opposition while they're trying to hide this bloodline so nobody knows about it. And the Illuminati are fighting back, and they're doing their best to find the Holy Grail and expose it and expose the church for what they truly were, which was basically a bunch of liars, that Jesus wasn't as pure as they tried to make him out to be, which I don't understand what the big fuss would have been anyways. It doesn't take away from his purity if the guy's married and has a kid. So why's the big ordeal and all these wars where there's millions of people dying? So now we're going to get into how there's a couple of different conspiracy theories that all jumble kind of into one, where next this group, it's called the Illuminati, they form themselves in 1776, and their basic idea that they want to expose the Catholic Church and call them out because they're lying to their members about this bloodline from Jesus. So they organize, and there's these behind the scenes battles that you don't really hear about, you've never really seen or anything like that, but the Illuminati basically hide in the shadows and try to find the bloodlines from Jesus so that they can one day expose that to the masses and expose the church for what they were supposedly lying about. Now, this group, the Illuminati, they're based on the premise that they want to enlighten people. They want you to know the truth about things. They want you to know how these things work. And all the other stuff about a new world order and taking over the world and having the elite 1% and stuff like that is irrelevant to this particular conversation. But basically they're trying to show everybody that the church is lying to them. So they organize, May 1st of 1776, they organize their group. And they start gathering their information and pulling all of the weight that they can to get all the information to expose the truth. And then all of a sudden they disappear. They're no longer around because they're getting a whole lot of heat from the Catholic Church, which is huge. It's the only religion that I know of that has their own country. So they have all of their files and stuff all locked away in a secret archive that nobody can have access to without the permission of the Pope himself. And so all these other groups that are trying to expose the truth can't find anything on it because it's all locked away in the vault. and so it's under pretty good lock and key. They no longer have a reason to keep the Knights Templar around. So they kind of disorganized them, and they have a big falling out. They're not a big name anymore that nobody ever thinks about, but they're still around, and they're still keeping the secret today. Which brings me to my next point. The other conspiracy theory that a lot of people hear about is the misinformation from Europe, particularly around the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, which could have to do with the Catholic Church's cover-up. If you look at these things all in perspective, if this had happened, it would explain these other theories that are being presented to people on other conspiracies. The church would give misinformation, and there'd be a lot of missing information throughout that time when they're fighting and trying to keep the bloodlines of Jesus hidden. So they're going to misinform people, they're going to lie to them, they're going to hide all this information. So it becomes really difficult to pick out what's true and what's false from them times, because of all the misinformation and all the misguided truths that come out of the Catholic Church in order to protect this bloodline, the Holy Grail, if you will. And so all these things kind of tie together with the bloodlines of Jesus and the misinformation and the Illuminati and the Crusades and you know, all this other stuff. They all kind of tie together if you allow yourself to believe in the premise that there is actually a bloodline from Jesus. All of these things can kind of run one into the next. So if you explain the one from the beginning, all of the rest of them start to make sense. So anyways, I've given you the information that I know, that I was able to come up with, and a few hypotheses that I have come up with that I thought may be interesting to someone. From here, please do your own research. Let me know if you come up with some hard facts that I haven't presented that may be relevant. I might be inclined to do another part to this if I get enough good feedback and good hard facts that I can put it all together again. Not saying I'm right, not saying I'm wrong. Either way is possible. This is just a theory. There's lots of theories out there. It's possible that this could have happened, and it would explain a lot of things. It's also possible that it never happened, and people are just really paranoid about stuff. So, anyways, thanks for watching. Click that like button, subscribe, share it with your friends on Facebook and whatever other social media websites you use. Comment, please. Comment. Leave me your comments on what you think, what you know, some sources for information maybe. And overall, thanks for watching and have a good one.